Hi, everyone. This is Bernadette at Carista Mortgage. Joining me today again is our VP Realtor partner, Toni Sing. Hi, Toni. I want to say hi to our viewers out there.
Hi everyone. Hi Bernadette. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so it's a very different time than last month.
Mm,
Last month, we were talking about how quiet, our definition of quiet and somebody's definition of quiet is different, but it's not as robust. And then there was a shift. I had a few buyers, and then I think you have a few buyers and sellers. And you had mentioned you had seven that completed last week, 1 week. This is not 1 month, guys. It was last week. So can
yeah.
you tell us for the clients whose properties you sold, how effective what did you do to move that inventory, to move those homes to be able to sell them very well? And then for the buyers, talk about how much discount and how successful were and what you did to make it
Mhm.
successful.
It's such an interesting market right now because we are still very active, particularly over the last 2 weeks. We were able to so we had the seven completions and then five accepted offers. So it's a lot. But then an important question is, well, how many of those transactions and people that we were helping were sellers and buyers? So it's about
Yes.
50-50. What's interesting though is for most of our sellers, a couple of the sellers, we were able to achieve record pricing, which is strange because the market is not amazing right now for sellers. It's really not. And so I asked myself, why were we able to do that? I think it was probably a perfect storm for those clients in the way that one, we were able to meet the right buyer. So the right buyer is going to pay premium, even in a market that's
Ah.
not spectacular for sellers. If they're the right buyer and there's something special about the home, to get
Mm.
those people. They're going to pay the most amount of money for it. Two, what would the second thing be? Oh, price. I always talk about pricing strategy. So
Yes.
pricing strategy is very important. For detached houses, especially, it has to be priced right. As long as it's priced right, it will move, but
Mm.
it's not a crazy market such that you're generating multiple offers and it's a frenzy as people and sellers have been used to over the last 5 years, right? Or
Mm.
5 to 7 years.
Mhm.
It's just more of a normal market. And then three is that it's very important when listing and selling a property to be a pillar of strength for the seller. So
Mm.
what that means is,
Mm.
of course, we're seeing on the buying side, people beating up sellers on price. But then for us, when we're representing a seller, we want to make sure that we remain strong in the pricing strategy, strong in the fact that we can justify the value. And we really
Mm.
don't want to give anything away in terms of personal scenario or bottom line for our sellers. And I think all of those three things is why the we sold a house in Port Moody recently. It was a couple weeks ago. And that one is very high pricing, very, very high pricing. There's no data that can justify the price that we achieved on that sale. So our seller did very well. But on the buying side, then, right? Then if you're a buyer,
Mm.
let's speak to the buyers. So with our buyers, we're able to get them really good deals right now. But it's funny because we're all in the same market.
Yes.
And so what
Yes.
does that look like? For buyers, I'll give you an example. So last week, there was a home that was listed for around 1,950,000, 1,950,000. A bit high for this market. Now, in the previous market, maybe last year, sure, they would have been able to get close to that. So last year, all the way until March, sure, it could have been worth close to that price. It's a very different market, though, for sellers in general now over the last few months. And so what we had done with that was unfortunately we wrote a low offer, but low is relative, right? That's just how the market is. To the seller, it was low. And we didn't get a counter. The sellers didn't want a counter because it was very offensive, but the sellers hadn't yet adjusted to the current market. So we just
Ah.
left it unattached to it. And then we went back about 2 weeks later and they had no activity. They had had a price drop, no activity. And so it was a tough negotiation, but we were able to secure this property for less than $1,740,000. Now, it's all relative, right? Because it's like, well, the list price, the sales price, but
Still, that's
it,
big.
yeah, it would have been around 8% off from market value, actual market value just a few months ago. So our buyer for that property is extremely happy. Um, I hope that answers your question because
It
it's the
does.
strategies that we use.
Basically what I'm hearing you say, if you're a seller, you have the seller, what you capture in the house is there's something special about the house.
Mhm.
And zoom in on that and highlight that. And you need to be a pillar of strength for your seller to justify the value. And you can justify the value with that something special, right?
Mhm.
Like, and you can stick with that. In your case, I think I also what I heard you say, you did not rush it. Like
No.
sometimes I think some realtors, because, for whatever reason, they needed to move inventory fast, they'll just let's go lower and what have you. But hearing you say that in this type of market, you were able to get top dollar speaks to really the core of those key essential points that you had mentioned. What's special about the house, be a pillar of strength, and strongly justify the value of
Mhm.
that home.
It's harder right now for strata though, because you said something important. It's kind of like, well, if you have something that is special about the home, it's possible to
Yes,
find that in strata as well. However, the reality is for certain areas for strata, you have replicated
yes, yes,
oversupply of certain product.
correct.
There's not many potentially differentiating factors. There could be, but then what do you do for strata listing?
Yes.
Someone needs to sell. So strata is difficult right now. The
Oh.
most important thing with strata, like, so for example, we're not even dropping the price on some of the stratas because I don't even think it's going to do much. But what would be really important for that is making sure that everything shows amazing. So what we've
Mm,
had to do then in some of those cases is proper staging,
yeah.
have to relist and reposition the property slightly just even
Hmm.
from a marketing standpoint.
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
generating more activity. But strata is tough, just so everybody knows. I mean,
Yeah, well,
it's
I
possible to
get
sell though.
it's still because it's a strata, you need to highlight your property as something special. Otherwise, if it's all vanilla,
So then
then
it's the
I'm
feeling, right? Like
right.
if you were a buyer for that type of product, what's going to be special about it, considering you all have you and the 15 to 20 other people in the same, right? Same floor
Yeah.
plate, have the same floor plan as you. Well,
Yeah.
it absolutely needs to feel amazing inside. Like if I walk inside, does this feel like a place that I could call home? Or is
Yes.
this a good investment? Is the building in great condition? Now,
Hmm.
I know we were going to talk about strategy though, because most people need to sell in order to purchase in this market. That's pretty common.
Yes. So I have a few buyers right now that are that needed to sell and buy. So what are your top three strategies in that case? Because you're doing both for those
Yeah.
scenario. So what are
So
your top three strategies if I have to sell and I have to buy as
yeah.
well?
Happy to answer this question. It depends. The strategy that we recommend, we have three. We use other strategies, but the top three that we're using right now, given the market,
Yes.
it depends on the individual client scenario, which one we would use. And also, the market's still shifting a little bit, but we use three. So the first one would be we have been successful with subject to sale offers. It's never a guarantee. Subject to sales can be really difficult, right? Because there's so many moving parts. But we just successfully sold one of our clients via subject to sale. And so
Ah.
what that means is they find the right property for them. They secure a contract on their buying side, and we list their property for sale. But the first contract is contingent on them selling their home. It takes a lot of skill to do that, and the clients have to be
Mhm.
prepped properly because it is stressful on the client. There's no way
Okay.
around it. It's stressful. You have to meet the deadlines and the timelines.
Yeah.
However, for certain clients where their purchase is something specific and there's not a lot of inventory available for it, that can be a good option, right? Like obviously if
Hmm.
there was lots of options for them, they might not need the subject to sale, but some clients are very specific in what they need, like a specific home, specific era, has to have certain components to it that would work for the family, and maybe that's more rare. So in that case, a subject to sale can work without leaving these people homeless.
Homeless, yeah.
Right? You
Hmm.
can't do that. The second strategy that we use is subject to seller purchasing. So, in scenarios where obviously the client has to sell first, we can put their home on the market first. When an offer comes in, because it's actually harder to get the home sold right now, right? On the listing side,
Uh-huh.
when an offer comes in, you would have to negotiate into the contract subject to the seller purchasing by X date. That's going to depend on the buyers that are coming to the home and if they would allow it, because obviously the buyers for the property want to know if
Yeah.
you've purchased.
Yeah.
But that's why the negotiation is so important in terms of navigating through that and making sure that it can be articulated properly for everyone concerned, such that we're setting it up for success.
Hmm.
The third strategy that we have used recently is a sliding date clause in either direction. So, for example,
Hmm.
in any contract, I mean, it's challenging. It's a work of art because you really need to be cautious about how the clause is written and how it
Hmm.
will be implemented. So, an example of this would be, let's say we had a home that was on the market, ready to sell. Our clients needed to sell to purchase. Well, typically people need the equity out of their home in order to
Yes.
do that for the mortgage, right?
Yes.
So if you have a sliding date clause in either direction, what that would look like is it could be the seller or the buyer, basically, right? Whoever we're representing has the ability to move the completion date by X amount of days earlier or later
Later.
than we currently have, right? And they would give notice in writing to the other party. I know that this is a bit confusing, but the three strategies that we use do work. And it's explained to the client based on each individual scenario. It kind of depends on what they're looking to achieve. Does that
Well,
make sense? Because it makes sense in my head.
yeah, well, you know what? The gist of what I got is when you're selling and buying, it will be stressful. So I
Yeah.
think the fact that that the people know that ahead of time is very, very clear and important. You're juggling two things at the same time, right? And showing and whatever. But in order to be successful, what I heard you say is negotiation is a work of art. So whether it's strategy one, strategy two, strategy three, there's a very fine art to it that you need to deploy, and your experience, your professionalism, your strategic mind enables the client to have a successful strategy for each point. So the bottom line is you can have the in this kind of environment, if you want to upgrade, it is possible as long as you have the right partner to do it, who's got the experience, and they can recommend to you they can recommend you the strategies they can deploy. Listen and understand which one is going to be most effective. It's not something that you can do on your own, so you really need a professional to do it. Yeah, so those came across loud and clear for me, Toni. So for all the buyers out there, you heard Toni, she was able to negotiate almost 200,000 because again, 1.9 and 1.7, but still that's huge. In this kind of market, she's also were able to sell the properties on the flip side for top dollar instead of the other way around. And it's because again, bottom line, her experience, her strategy, and her art of negotiation has made it successful. So, Toni, any last piece of advice for our viewers out there today?
No, I wanted to thank you so much for having me on. So I've got the kids in the background, which is why I muted myself. You saw this little like person over here. I don't think so. I think that I like living in possibility, Bernadette. You do too, right? And so I think that if anyone's looking to make a move right now or whatever your reasons are, I think that the first step would be getting a pre-approval for a mortgage. We can't do anything, us as realtors cannot do anything without knowing what the budget is and a proper pre-approval so that we can set it up properly. And that's where they would contact you, Bernadette, because we can't even talk strategy unless we know what the numbers are. It's impossible. And we don't like to leave clients in a stressful situation or over leveraged, right? So we need the budget to know, do we need the subject to sale? Do we need the subject to purchase? Can we do it with a sliding date clause and a long completion? If the numbers are too tight, we would never do that third option, right? Like it's,
Yes.
can't.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you highlighted that. We had a client, we were able to get financing approved within 2 days.
Oh,
And basically
good for you.
because you said the key word, they were pre-approved. So
Yeah.
they knew they had their ducks in a row and everything. I said, once your offer is accepted, these are the only documents I need because you provided me everything ahead of time.
Yeah.
So, like what you said, the strategy cannot work unless the numbers make sense. So, thank
You know
you,
what it's
Toni.
like to give an analogy? And this is how I actually feel when
It
clients come to us and they haven't done that yet. And then we have to put the brakes on. And it's like, hey, we'll look after you, but make sure you do this. If they don't have a pre-approval, it feels like we're shooting in the dark with strategy. Like actually, that I've got a gun and we're shooting in the dark and I have no
Yes.
idea where the target is.
Maybe this, maybe that, maybe that. Oh, and then,
And we
then
can't.
nothing got hit because it's all not gonna work.
Well, but it's also, it gives us anxiety because we don't want it to be risky for the client. The purpose of that is actually for them so that we can have the proper strategy.
Yeah, like you say, it's already stressful as it is. At least if the numbers make sense, that's like a huge chunk of the stress and uncertainty taken care of, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But thank
cool.
you so much for working with all of our clients and providing them with great pre-approvals. It's very helpful.
Oh, thank you, Tony, and thank you for taking care of our clients very well. Your strategic mind, your art of negotiation comes through loud and clear. So, anybody who's watching right now, if you're thinking of buying, selling, and you need someone to help you guide through this amazing, crazy, uncertain market that we have, we're sharing the link to Tony's contact here. Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
great day,
everyone. Bye,
everyone.
Bernadette. Thanks for having me.
Bye.